Hey guys, I'm back for part two for partner two in Prezi. I want to finish out this presentation by talking about where we left off. So we went from technology, and you'll notice that it does this zoom in feature. We went to movie, we went to name brand products, and now I'm going to go over to fashion. So once again, I zoom in on the fashion trend, which is ready to wear. So the fashion trend that became popular in the 1940s is known as ready to wear. Now, this sounds like a strange trend, but it's really important to understand the era that we're talking about. During World War II, clothing, especially made from cotton and silk, became extremely hard to come by. And so consumers living in the United States, especially women, had to come up with ways that were more functional for World War II era since clothing was being rationed. So what 1940s actually inspired what was ready to wear, which was less bulkier, easier to make. It inspired two-piece looks. Trousers and blouses became popular. And because of this functional change in clothing, due to World War II and Paris being taken over by the Nazis, New York actually became the new fashion capital. So some of the images that you see are women wearing ready-to-wear dresses. You'll notice that they're closer to the hip, they're less bulky, they're made of single pieces or the two-piece ensembles that became very popular. So women could change blouses, wear it with trousers so that they had to buy less clothing, but they had more options. Now, you're going to notice in this case that I actually chose two pictures. That's fine. Both pictures actually came from the same site, so I tried to make my life a little easier. If both pictures come from the same site, you only need to cite it once. So I have both pictures, History Channel, and I will, when I go to your bibliography and I back check your sources, I will double check to make sure that they came from that source. But remember, make your life easier. Don't overcomplicate how many pictures you choose. Okay, moving on to the next topic. The next topic will be artist. The artist that I chose was Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock was actually born in 1912 and died in 1956. He studied under Thomas Hart Benton in traditional platforms, and he decided that he wanted to branch away from the traditional techniques of the past and bring together a new, unique style. He started with something known as splatter action, where he splattered paint onto the canvas. And then he moved into a later period known as the drip paintings. His drip paintings actually are what made him very famous. Fortunately for Jackson Pollock, he was a very depressed individual, and he was involved in alcohol, and he unfortunately died in a car accident in 1956, tragically while under the influence of alcohol. Little background on Jackson Pollock. I just want you to give a little straightforward of the artist, how they got into art. Jackson Pollock got into art from an early age, and so he went on to become really important. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is actually find a piece of art by the artist. So what I've created here, this is one of his most famous paintings. It's known as She-Wolf. It is in his drip period, and you're going to notice it's hard to see, but if you look carefully, you'll see a wolf. And you're going to notice that the wolf advances to the left, and it's overlaid with abstract lines, meaning to show chaos. Now, you have to remember, Jackson Pollock was heavily influenced in the 1940s by World War II. So this is really reflecting the climate of World War and the chaos that it brings. It's one of the most iconic pieces. It's worth millions of dollars. In fact, one of Jackson Pollock's paintings sold for $20 million. So why should Jackson Pollock be remembered? He revolutionized modern art with abstract paint. His wife went on to set up a foundation that actually helps young artists. And he basically kind of changed the advent of the way that we look at art. Now, you may look at this and say it looks like scribbles, but there are many people around the world that actually look at this and see beauty. So understanding that he changed the way traditional art would be looked at. All right, so that's an example of artist. Once again, I gave a little background into who he was. I showed you the painting. I talked about what it represented, and then I explained why he should be remembered. Don't forget to do that, and you'll notice the picture citation. All right, moving on to my next topic, which is actually headline events. What you're looking at is something known as the Coconut Grove, which was located in Boston. I did not spell coconut wrong in this case. This is actually how it was spelled. So in November 28th, 1942, there was a fire in Boston at the Coconut Grove, which killed 491 people and injured several more. Now, why did this event occur? This was a year after World War II had started and the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And as an escape to get away from the drama of war, people were going in flocks to the theater and local clubs. And unfortunately, these clubs who wanted to make money did not set a restriction on how many people they let into the club. And so places were jam-packed. Well, the fire broke out that night and quickly spread. Had the club not been as full of as many people as it had been, it would have actually not caused as many deaths as it did. So what was the outcome of this event? It led to stronger fire safety laws, and it was passed in all major cities. It should be remembered for this reason because it actually set limits on what people would bring into clubs and how many people were allowed in. Another strange side note to this and why it should be remembered is that the victims of Coconut Grove, actually the ones that survived, went on to Mass General Hospital, and many of the burn victims were actually treated with a new up-and-coming drug called penicillin. And what this did was it actually stopped the spread of infections as they were completing skin grafts on the individuals, and it allowed them to survive by killing the bacteria. Now, why is this significant? Because during World War II, the government was inspired by this case to go forward and begin to use penicillin to treat officers who had been injured in war themselves. Okay, so right there, I just gave you a sense. I gave you what happened, why it happened. I talked a little bit about, how many people were killed, and I successfully explained why it should be remembered. So keep that in consideration. And once again, don't forget your citation. All right, so the last event I want to talk about is judicial. In this case, I actually chose a law. And the law that I chose was Truman Ends Segregation in the Armed Forces. In 1948, President Truman was being kind of pressured, and also by choice. He was a believer in wanting to desegregate, but he wanted to do it carefully because he knew the backlash. He decided to do it at the federal level, and in 1948, January 26, he officially ended racial segregation in the armed forces. He also added an addendum that made it so that all individuals who were in the military would receive equal treatment, and that meant based on medical, being able to go to college. This really opened up the doorway for groups like African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans to begin to have equality at the federal level. This was the first piece of federal legislation that led to desegregation and would be remembered for this reason. So judicial is an interesting one. You can choose a law, you can choose a crime. Remember that your main focus is that you're trying to prove that it should be remembered. So as I talked about this, I talked about how the federal government ended segregation, and then I would go on to explain that this led to kind of the inspiration for the civil rights movement that would follow. So that is my presentation for Partner 2, and I hope this gives you a sense of what Prezi's like. If you decide you don't want to use Prezi as a platform, that's perfectly acceptable. I would encourage that once again you go to Partner 1's Google presentation because it does look a little differently and how it's set up. And obviously if you switch topics, you're going to need to go to Partner 1 anyway to look at topics that might not have been presented in these two segments. So I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions. Good luck on your research. Don't forget your citations. Remember 1 to 2 pictures. Keep your text minimal, and you will do a great job on this project. All right. Have a good one.